Salam and peace. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV and on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, Roku, whole lot of social media, as well as on our own website, which is muslimnetwork.tv. Well, thank you so much for watching, and continue to do so and tell your friends about a unique conversation which takes place here. This is the first time in the US history that the top 12 billionaires in the US have a combined wealth of $1 trillion. That's quite a bit of money. Do you know how to write 1 trillion? Well, it's lots of money. But while rich are getting richer to the tune of 1 trillion, there are issues. And those issues deal with wealth distribution, income inequality in our country. And this is exactly the right time to talk about it, because the politicians are around. Democrats, Republicans, President Trump, Vice President Biden, and your congressperson, the Joe and Dick and Harry, and on the streets who are looking to talk to you about your votes. And this is the time to talk about it, no matter where you are, what state you are in, what city you're talking about, or the federal government. This is the opportunity. The people of color, Black and brown workers, are significantly more likely to be exposed at work. And they're most likely to be essential workers. And at the same time, they get less of the money. So they're essential worker disproportionately do not have protective equipment, disproportionately do not have health insurance and all that, and disproportionately they get lesser level of money as well. And they're suffering at despite being essential services. 61% of Latino household right now have job losses and income losses, as compared to only 38% of white household. So Black and brown communities are facing the real brunt of it, but billionaires continue to make money. For Muslims, this being Muslim Network TV, you will get this angle also. God has told us in the Quran very clearly that wealth must not circulate only among the rich. And God has provided us some systemic solutions to reduce the wealth concentration. And building on those things and the principles which Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, preached, there are now literally tens of thousands of PhDs on Islamic economics, and it's a $4 trillion economy in itself. Not all focused on the wealth distribution, though. They have somewhat incorporated open capitalism, while some features are there. So it is open to criticism, but it is based on the right principles. Now, there is a debate among Islamic finance people and Islamic economists that is it fulfilling the purpose for which it has been created. So as America is talking about the future and income distribution and racial inequalities in our society, and this continued to happen. Just this morning in Wisconsin, in front of 3 children, a Black man, whose last name is Black, was shot on the back 7 times in front of his own children. What is happening? What can we do about that? At least we can talk to politicians and raise our voices and join the movement. But to discuss the state of this wealth concentration among the 12 billionaires who together own $1 trillion today. We have our guest, Omar Ocampo. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Omar Ocampo.
Thank you for having me, and it's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Omar is a researcher for the program on inequality and common good at the Institute for Policy Studies. By the way, I worked at the institute which has similar name. Instead of for, it has off there. Okay, so tell me this, help me understand. Amazon says everybody, including me, is ordering more goods from them. So I understand this thing that they are making money. But who's ordering things from Facebook and Tulsa? Why these people are becoming billionaires?
Yeah, so the interesting thing about companies like Facebook and even Google is that they actually don't really produce a product or deliver a product, or they're not like an online retailer like the way Amazon is. And basically, the way they make their money is through providing platforms where we basically produce the content that they collect and then they sell to advertisers. So that's how they're making their money, is by our use of their platforms. And I think that if you want to have a more equitable redistribution of wealth, that I actually think that we should be able to tax Facebook and Google for selling the information, our data, and we produce that data for them. Then I think that we should have some type of dividend in return.
Well, that's a good idea. I mean, we are producers by going there and putting things. And do they completely own that, what we are producing?
Yes, they completely own it, and they have very extensive profiles on us. And this is why we get, and to a certain degree, I actually don't mind it, because, if I go order sushi or purchase some type of foods, it's okay for me to get like an ad when I go on these websites that, basically are customized for me. The problem also becomes is, I'm getting all this junk mail, in my email, in my physical address. And the way that is done is because, they own our information, and, we basically don't really get a say on, what information they can, really collect and acquire. I mean, they have like terms and conditions, but that no one really reads that. And then there's always loopholes around everything. So yeah, they own our information, and they know a lot about us.
So it is our weakness as consumer that we are unable to do collective bargaining with them. So what about a concept that in which these people who are collecting our data, information about what we have produced, so labor need to come together, either in class action lawsuits, or since all of us have signed those yes to those agreements without reading any of that, what about a collective bargaining process on behalf of consumers who are producers as well?
That is an excellent idea, and I support that 1,000%. The issue is that, let's take something like a platform like Uber. They fight hard to basically say that their drivers are actually not their employees but contractors, and that basically exempts them from a lot of labor laws, and that prohibits us and weakens us from a point of view of collective bargaining. So I think one of the first steps is, to help build a labor movement and a solidarity among workers, in order to they can come, step to the table and have some, power, and basically to be able to keep some of the wealth that we help produce.
Okay. So this is one way they are making their money. But these, the way they have become together a trillionaire, if that term could be used, is a whole lot to do with the stock market. That whole lot of individuals are putting their money on stock and gambling. Economy is going down, poor are becoming poorer, uncertainty prevails, but this gambling machine of a stock market continue to go up. So isn't this in some way they are benefiting, and individual who are playing, which probably I don't know how many people are in the stock market, they are becoming richer as well until
Yeah.
they all lose.
Yeah. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that the stock market equals the economy, and the two are actually quite divorced. The stock market actually does not reflect, the current amount of goods and services being produced. It's actually basically investors trying to predict the future. And so this is why a positive news story or even a comment from someone like Elon Musk can temporarily send markets up or down, because it affects investor outlook. Now, at the moment, research shows that only 14% of Americans are directly invested in the stock market, and the vast majority of them, about 90%, have six-figure salaries. So when the stock market is doing well, it primarily benefits people who are already high income earners and those who already have wealth.
So, so do you have any idea how many are those organizational or companies who are benefiting, and how many individuals participate? I mean, I have people who have built their house based on individuals who have built their houses by playing in a stock market. So there seems to be a large number of individuals who are in this stock market as well.
Yes. So again, I see the stock market as almost like a mechanism that just primarily benefits people who already have wealth. And I also think one of the reasons why the stock market does well is primarily because the Federal Reserve kind of guarantees a floor for investors, and investors can be.
Tell us, what do they exactly guarantee?
So when a corporation's in the red and they're having losses, the Federal Reserve has purchased $1 billion in corporate bonds. They did this for ExxonMobil, for example, and they also lower interest rates. So this basically boosts the confidence of investors. And then an investor could be a corporation, they could be a foreign country. Or it could be, individuals, whether they're high net worth or, they make, $100,000 a year. Again, 90% is important to reiterate. 90% of the people who are invested in the stock market have six-figure salaries. So that means that people on the, who make less than
so 90% of the people who invest in the stock market have 100,000 plus annual income.
Correct. And I think I think that makes sense because they have more disposable income. So for someone who makes maybe $50,000 a year, they have to worry about rent. They have to, groceries. That eats up a lot more of their surplus income. People who have six-figure salaries, something that has happened in the past 40 years, there's been like a revolt on the tax system. So they're paying less taxes, they're getting tax cuts, and that just gives them more money to basically gamble and look for short-term profits at the expense of long-term stability.
So when federal government, Federal Reserve get involved in, say, buying $1 billion worth of share of, an oil company or any other company, Federal Reserve is on our behalf, right, on the public. So if they make profit, we're making profit in theory. Is that logic acceptable to you?
I think in theory that makes sense, but the Federal Reserve itself is like a mixture of like private and public. but basically, the Federal Reserve is there just to protect the banks and make sure that they're solvent and they don't go bankrupt. And in theory, that's supposed to help us in the long term, because that means that these financial institutions can provide us with essential financial services. But again, most of those profits they concentrate at the top, and this has been a problem for 40 years. Where there's an extreme concentration of wealth, and to me, that's the logical conclusion to the so-called Reagan Revolution of the 1980s and the transformation of both political parties, Democrat and Republican, but particularly Republican Party, of being parties that are dominated by money.
You're watching Muslim Network TV, and this is Imam Malik Mujahid talking with Omar Ocampo, and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Omar Ocampo, who is with the Institute for Policy Studies. Facebook faced a boycott. I mean, a whole lot of people were holding their advertisement there and all that. It seems that the people or the consumer were in some way supported by some corporations for a limited period of time to put pressure on Facebook. But in the same time, Facebook is among those, Zuckerberg is among those 12 billionaires who have become together a trillionaire. So what were the weaknesses of those corporations working with people to put pressure on Facebook?
I think one of the main weaknesses that platforms like Facebook, they're a convenient platform, and they make entertainment easy. So and also they also have Facebook also has an enormous amount of wealth, so that they can deploy at any time in order to undermine any type of campaigns that goes against them. And then they'll have some changes at the margins, and as a way of staving off pressure. But I just think that Facebook's market share there is so vast. So, for example, they're also owned WhatsApp, and WhatsApp is a great service, and they also own Instagram. So they just did that level of concentration makes it harder to undermine their economic power.
So what is the state of consumer organizing at this moment in America? Is it somehow coordinated? What is consumer activism in this country? It has some impact in the past, say on auto industry and standards and all that. When Ralph Nader, I think he's still around, but I don't know how effective it is. So there are only two things left for individuals. One is to have the right type of government with the right type of policies. Second is that people organizing themselves to have an impact. So at this moment, let's talk first about people organizing themselves. What do you see? Are people really concerned about? Institute for Policy Studies, it doesn't have a huge impact in terms of communicating its message, does it?
Yeah, so I think as far as organizing, I think one of the silver linings throughout this pandemic is that it has radicalized workers in a sense. So for me, General Electric workers didn't want to basically continue producing, whatever products they were, because they wanted to, redirect their production towards, ventilators. Whole Foods, the workers went on strike. And these are and they're asking for things that make perfect sense. They want higher wages, they want high hazard pay, they want benefits. So are these going to be goals that are going to be concrete in the long term? It's too early to tell. As far on the consumer end, I actually don't see much activity, and if there is, and then I must have missed it. But I think at the moment these tech companies are taking full advantage of the fact that this pandemic plays to all their strengths. So there's an increase in cloud services, streaming, entertainment, online retail, grocery food delivery. They at the moment they're just basically capturing and cornering the market.
So yeah, I mean, that's a valid point, that unions. So if it is that type of situation in which union can work, does Google have a union? I mean, there are two. There are employees, and then there are the whole world which is consuming it. Facebook, there are employees, then there's the whole world consuming it, who are in some strange way the main producer of the content which is supporting the company. So what is the organizing in the digital frontier?
It's a very, very good question. Unfortunately, even though people, the right wing, they tend to paint, tech executives in Silicon Valley as some type of, liberal bastion. Unfortunately, they also have kind of like a right wing economic point of view, because the tech sector is also very anti-union and anti-organized labor. So it's a struggle, and then people who are in Amazon and Google, when they're trying to organize their workers, they have gotten fired, and this has made some news. So I think that this is a very important front and battle and struggle that needs to happen, and that's growing the labor movement so workers can participate in the management of their companies and negotiate what share of the profits goes to the workers and to the owners, and then basically have more say in the direction, because to me, at least from some of the statements that I have read, that sometimes the workers have a lot more better perspective on social issues than the shareholders and the owners, who only care about their profits. There was the issue with Wayfair workers, and then the owner of Wayfair saying we want a more depoliticized workforce. So this is going to be a ongoing long-term struggle.
So one of the things which you just said, is important to understand. You're saying these billionaires, although they might be liberal in their worldview, when it comes to their economics, they are conservative and closer to the worldview of, Republican type people. So how do they reconcile? How do you see that? I mean, one of the things on which I noticed is that they are pretty independent people. I mean, when you hear Bill Gates, he is open to criticism of a whole lot of conservative, and he's subject to huge type of conspiracy theories by conservatives and all that. So considering that, and he started off through his labor. He wrote the code, which Microsoft, MS-DOS. I don't know, were you born when MS-DOS used to rule the world or not? But so these people are benefiting from the labor which they have produced, and they have a worldview, and they're sharing, and they come out as though they're trying to help the world in their own way, how they could be accused of abusing the conservative economic policies who only favor them, not the society?
Yeah, so research shows that people who are wealthy, even the wealthy liberals in the tech sector, they are more anti-tax, anti-regulation, and anti-organized labor than your average voter, even among your average Republican voter, and this results in the routine defeat of vital progressive and social democratic reforms. So someone like I don't know, some tech billionaire, they may have a progressive or liberal point of view when it comes to a whole lot of social issues. So will say that they might be for a universal basic income or racial justice, pro LGBTQ, but when it comes to their pocketbooks, they're completely aligned with the plutocrats that who basically capture our democratic institutions and make them unresponsive to voters, and basically just serve the interests of the high net worth individuals and families. So, yeah.
When Warren Buffett, who is among the top 12, although he didn't make as much money as other people during this period, when he speaks up that, hey, my secretary pays more tax than I do, and system need to be changed, isn't he speaking the truth?
In raw dollar terms, he definitely the billionaire, the oligarchic dozen, they do spend pay more in taxes than your average person, than you and I. But if we actually look at it in relation to their wealth, when we take all the other taxes into account, they actually spend less they actually pay less in taxes than their secretary, for example. So to me, that just shows that the officials, the government has their priorities not in the correct, because there's no reason why someone who's making between $40,000 to $60,000 a year is effectively paying the same amount of taxes as someone who's worth $70 billion. It makes no sense.
Or not paying any taxes. I mean, as Amazon's leader, you just laugh at it. I mean, how in the world is it possible for them? You use the word oligarchy, and you use that in your article, which I read to have as a guide for today's discussion. Now, oligarchs is a concept in which the richest people essentially control the government. How these dirty dozens, which you don't call them dirty dozen, do you?
Oligarchic dozen.
Yeah, you call it oligarchic dozen, but you sound like dirty dozen there. So tell me that. How do they influence the government? I mean, they have been on the receiving end some of these times.
Yeah. So I also want to kind of put in a plug. So one of the most eye-opening books I've read in, let's say, the past 10 years was a book entitled Oligarchy, written by Jeffrey Winters, who's a professor at Northwestern. And he defines an oligarch as anyone who deploys their material resources politically for economic reasons. And it's mainly to defend their wealth from threats, which is usually taxation or expropriation. And then Winters, he shows how in the United States, the rich basically hire an army of professionals, accountants, tax consultants, lawyers, and their whole interest their whole job is basically to advance the interests and protect the wealth of the very riches, and this comes at the expense of maybe what the majorities of the Democratic majority, the majority of Americans are in favor of increasing taxes on the wealthy. But what ends up happening? They always routinely get tax cuts. So, and the thing is, when you have such wealth concentration, it undermines democracy. So material inequality translates to political inequality. And as I said before, the interest of the super rich and the non-affluent are not necessarily aligned because, again, they're anti-tax, anti-labor. So in short, this wealth concentration, especially at this scale, is terrible for democracy because they end up influencing the politics at more than you and I can. Public opinion does not always move the needle in Washington. The wealth does, and money does.
You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Omar Ocampo. And Muslim Network TV is always there on Galaxy 19 satellite, muslimnetwork.tv, Roku, Amazon Fire TV, Apple TV, and a whole lot of social media. So continue watching. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and I'm talking with Omar Ocampo about income equity in our country. 12 billionaires now have $1 trillion, and a whole lot of poor people here, white, blacks, browns, have very less. And especially the people of color have a huge income inequality. Now, you say, when government, when federal government couldn't show up when Katrina happens in Louisiana. Well, there are two storms heading that way. I hope they survive. But when that happened, it was the philanthropy. There was a mosque there in New Orleans, which became a center of people immediately coming in, and distribution system and other faith communities, churches, and these all join hands. So philanthropy is a big thing. Philanthropy is our social network. That may be more than $1 trillion worth in itself if everything is counted. So how come you're saying philanthropy is not the answer? This has built a social network in America, which when people suffer, this is what we have available. And we have seen right during this pandemic that people were helping in a tremendous way.
Yeah. So the main issue, the main problem with philanthropy is that in many cases, it just becomes a scheme to avoid taxes. And also, philanthropy cannot handle or solve structural problems. But I do see the utility of philanthropy. So, for example, I'm actually a big fan of Mackenzie Scott because she's a very bold giver. So she has already given away $1.7 billion of her wealth, and it's a lot of her money is not like a lot of her donations are not in some private foundation. She gives it directly. So, for example, she donated to Howard University, which is a historically Black university, and this is great. But at the same time, the giving pledge it's a pledge that the richest amongst in the world, they sign it with the pledge of donating half of their wealth during their lifetime or by the time they pass away. So yes, so Mackenzie has donated $1.7 billion in the past 12 months, but during the same time period, her wealth has also grown by 30 billion. So is that to me is just it's just mind-boggling. It's staggering how that's even possible. But back to the point, charity just does not scale, and sometimes they are necessary band-aids on structural problems. I always use the example of homelessness. I don't think we can end homelessness through through some donations, but with good public policy, and that involves taxation.
So a structural issue essentially need to be handled. So you're not against the philanthropy per se, but considering philanthropy to be a solution for all the structural issues will be a misunderstanding. That's where you stand, it seems.
Yeah, and that is absolutely correct. And I also find it interesting too is that there are billionaires who are concerned about poverty and inequality, but a lot of their donations or a lot of their giving is not funneled into programs that, for example, will help build assets for, let's say, Black and brown communities in the country, or to me, I think one great initiative would be, eliminating student debt, or paying off some people's liabilities. So, student debt, women, particularly Black women, have the highest amounts of student debt. So if you cancel it or have billionaires pay for it, it would do wonders for decreasing wealth inequality. There was this story not that long ago, which I think it was in Bloomberg, about how it was comparing two graduates. One was in the graduating class where Robert Smith paid off his student loan, and the other person who graduated, I think the year before, and he still has, a student loan debt. So the person who got his student loan debt paid off, he is now starting a business and he's saving up money to purchase a house. And the person who didn't have his student loan forgiven, he's putting off medical school because he just can't afford it. So if you want to tackle inequality, it'd be good to see some of this philanthropy go directly into the hands of some of the people who need it.
Tell me how this following things work. You write, and I quote, the US spends an estimated $729 billion a year to assist with individual wealth building, mostly on the already wealthy. How does that work?
Yeah, no, in general, because of how our governmental system is basically captured by the wealthy, most of the policies that they get passed when it comes to economic matters, it primarily benefits those who are already wealthy, and it helps build up their wealth even further. And then this is done. The most obvious of this is done through like tax cuts. So, for example, Trump in 2017, he passed a tax cut. And that tax cut is estimated that within the next 10 years is going to deprive the state of $1 trillion in revenue. And now Trump is also currently pledging to have a capital gains tax, and this is going to do nothing for the economy. It's not going to stimulate it. So again, and this is at a time where there's no stimulus bill, and every single day that goes by without a stimulus bill is going to cause more human suffering. But yet they just want to funnel billions of dollars more to basically the top 1%.
Another example which you have given, and I'd like you to explain somewhat, that 90% of 90 billion in tax-related housing assistance goes to a household with income over $100,000. Those earning 50,000 get roughly 1%. So which which housing assistant it is? Housing assistance means the people who are struggling for housing need to have some assistance, right? I mean, the wording implies that it is for those who are struggling for housing. How come only 1% goes to those who are probably the most struggling, which is 50 people earning 50,000 and under? How the people accomplish this? This is a problem with the way Congress has written laws, or is it the way tax structures are built, or there is no sure short ways of reaching those who are under 50,000 to assist them for housing?
Yeah, no, I mean, unfortunately, again, it goes back to our institutions being captured by the wealthy, and this housing assistance could include, the construction of, luxury real estate apartments, and it's basically being subsidized, and unfortunately,
no, is it the law or it's the implementation of law which is the problem here?
It's implementation and the lack of transparency, and and unfortunately,
so essentially a corruption in the implementation of some good laws.
Exactly, and but it also, unfortunately, there's also this an ideological point of view that says that wants to cut programs like that for people who don't earn a lot, because otherwise they say that it will foster dependence, and they're just there, and they don't want to work or earn a certain amount, or work more, because otherwise they will lose their benefits. Like that's a part of an ideology. So if they cut that, that's the logic, that they will somehow work more. But again, that's the ideology is perverse. It doesn't have it doesn't pair with the facts.
Tell us, what do you recommend for this? This whole thing to be interrupted. I mean, the cycle of inequality. Would you say inequality is increasing or decreasing?
Oh, inequality is increasing
substantially. So, how do we interrupt that?
Yeah, so we have our research recommends a number of solutions, some short term, some long term. So a short term solution would be putting a tax on excess profits. So we recommend the establishment of a pandemic profiteering committee. Right now, the Congress actually has a congressional oversight commission with regards to the funds of COVID-19, but this mainly deals with like transparency issues and how the money is used and their impact. But we recommend that it should go a step further and then look into if there's any profiteering in the economy, and then enact an excess profits tax on those who are, because that the revenue that can be raised from that can be given to help those in need. Some long-term solutions include like a progressive estate tax or a wealth tax, kind of modeled after what Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders have been proposing. So, for example, Warren wants a 2% tax on households with wealth over 100 million. Another, when it comes to
is there any wealth tax whatsoever at this moment in our country?
No, and a lot of people who are opponents of the wealth tax just say that people will figure out a way to not pay it. But I think it's something that needs to be done because it will help raise significant revenue, and we just need very good enforcement. Now,
Muslim, by the way, as religiously, Muslim are required. Of course, there's no enforcement authority. So every year they give out 2.5% of their total wealth, minus what is house and their usage. Um, I mean, something like that can generate a whole lot of money. So at this moment, it goes to the charities, and you're
mhm,
saying charity is not a solution. We need a structural solution. So
yeah,
the wealth tax does not exist at this moment in our country.
it does not.
Was there any time in our history when wealth tax was used?
I want to say no. Actually, I'm not really 100% familiar, but I do know that in Europe, in certain countries in Europe, the a wealth tax was enacted, and I think in particular France. Um, yeah, but I mean, we also have other solutions that I think that are important to discuss, especially when it comes to the racial wealth gap.
So,
Um,
so, so Biden and Warren, they lost, and Biden and Harris are the one who are going to be on a ticket.
mhm.
Now, what is their platform about? How their platform addresses income? I know there were some task forces between what Warren and Sanders were looking for, and the party side of the Biden. Are there something which is worthy of note?
I think as far as addressing wealth inequality, I don't think it's anything that noteworthy. They do propose increasing some taxes, but I don't think it's at a level in order to adequately deal with the wealth inequality that exists in our country, and it's unfortunate because I mean, I don't see any like bold programs that I think would be great for reducing wealth inequality, even along racial lines. So, for example, I think Cory Booker has a great plan, which is the baby bond program, which is basically a plan where every newborn is given $1,000. It's given an account. There's $1,000 put into it, and then about a maximum of $2,000 is added yearly. And then when the newborn turns 18, then they can use those resources in order to start a business, pay for university, purchase a home. And then there have been some studies done that show that this actually drastically reduces wealth inequality. Unfortunately, Biden has nothing like that. There's nothing about like something that's gaining popularity now is like a universal basic income, or Mark Cuban, who is a billionaire, he came out in favor of a federal jobs guarantee. These things are not in his platform. So I think the billionaire class are happy to support Joe Biden, because even though Joe Biden is not going to give the same extent of tax cuts that let's say like a Republican or Trump would give them, their the increases in taxation is not going to be significant. And then also something that's an inherent flaw of like, let's say like reforms, is that if wealth is still concentrated, like the economic base is still the same, reforms can always be curtailed in the future. So that's why there needs to be some type of like structural change that democratizes wealth, and that the people who help produce it get more of it.
Do you think Warren and Sanders' conversation and rhetoric and platform has contributed to overall discussion in terms of wealth inequality? And do you think there is a future for this conversation to be able to influence the public policy?
Yes. So I'm actually very optimistic for the future, because I think one thing that Bernie Sanders' 2016 candidacy represented is like a complete shift in our public conversation. So it has been moved to the left, and then we are seeing an influx of progressives winning little by little, across the country. So it's a movement that is going to need time to be built, and it's currently being built, and they have inequality, whether it's gender, racial, and just generally wealth inequality. It's at the center of their platforms. So I think that we just need to have more resources into to help these progressives win and seats, because again, a lot of these policies are actually quite popular with your average voter. But the thing is that I think that the right wing do a very good job at either ignoring economic issues, or making sure voters don't focus on economic issues, and that's to the detriment to your average person, because now you have people who are voting against their interests. So we need to have a platform where economic issues is forefront, and I think that the progressive movement is doing that.
Well, thank you so much. Omar Ocampo is a researcher at the Institute for Policy Studies. Thank you so much for your insight and your ideas, and please continue to write, and we'll continue to host you. This is just a very helpful conversation, and this is something which we love to speak more often. Thank you so much.
No, thank you for having me, and thank you for doing all the great work that you're doing now.
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Abdul Wahid, for producing today's show. You're watching Muslim Network TV. Our website is muslimnetwork.tv. What else? But we are also on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire, Roku TV, Apple TV, and many other places. So continue to watch and continue to give us your feedback. Peace. Salam.